Today on Don's Dirt, I'm sitting down with Jason Smith. Jason was a deer producer and ran a successful hunting operation until the CFIA stepped onto his farm and accused his herd of carrying disease. From that moment on, Jason was shut down. He was not allowed to buy or sell animals, and his entire operation was wiped out. What happened to Jason didn't just cost him his livelihood, it changed how he sees the government oversight forever. On this episode, Jason shares his first-hand experience dealing with the CFIA, working with deer boards, and being a part of an industry that slowly lost control to regulation and bureaucracy. And now, as the new beef regulations are being proposed, Jason is sounding the alarm. He believes that what happened to the deer industry could very easily happen to the beef industry next. This is a conversation about government overreach, control, fear, and why Jason believes farmers need to pay attention before it's too late. You don't have to agree with everything that's said here, but you should absolutely hear it. If you value honest conversations with farmers, producers, and people who've lived through the consequences of policy decisions, please like and subscribe. It helps this show reach more people and keeps these stories from being buried. Let's get into it. Thanks so much for being on the show today. So I first met you at a producers meeting in Spruce View before Christmas, and we were chatting about the new CFIA rules, and you stood up and told your story. And as soon as I heard your story in that meeting about your deer farm, I was like, I have to get this guy on the show, and I want to tell your story, and I want to tell your story to the world because it's so sad, and it's such a real thing. And people were so upset about the ostriches, but I think, man, you had it happen with deer, and so thanks for being on the show today. So can you just introduce yourself to us today?
My name's Jason Smith. I'm a farmer rancher from Eckville, just west of Red Deer, and started out my agricultural career in late 90s with whitetail deer, and then probably a dozen or 12, 14 years ago started raising bison on top of that, and then this will be 3 years ago now, CFIA decided that my farm needed to go. And that's kind of where all this come about. And we've seen some posts on the internet about some new regs coming in on the cattle. And that's why 3 years ago we got into cattle. We're going, hey, we're going to get into cattle because it's easy. You fill out your manifest, you brand your cows and put the tags in your ear, and life is good. No BS, less government input, and we can just retire farming in 20, 30 years and just enjoy it. So now that might be a little harder.
Yeah. So, okay. So to walk us through this journey. So you're into beef cows now. So that's kind of how you got awareness about the new rules and regulations that are coming down from the CFIA. And you've gone to I know that you've read the website. I know you're getting your information right from the CFIA website. It's not misinformation. It's just right from the source. And so, but what I'm really interested in hearing today is I want to hear your story. I want to hear how you got into deer, and then what happened with the CFIA and your deer, because it's a devastating story. When you told your story at our last meeting in Innisfail there, I sat beside your daughter and she was weeping, and I put my arm around her and I just held her, and like, this is a story that needs to be told. And it's not good. It's not okay. It's not right what happened on your farm. And so that's why you're here, and that's what I want to do. So how did it all start?
So I guess late 90s, went snowmobiling in Revelstoke, BC, and with a mutual friend, and he had a friend that I had met, and he was a deer farmer. And by the time the trip was over, I was convinced that was my end to agriculture. Seemed interesting, lots of stuff. I was a hunter, it kind of just fit. So it progressed, and as most of the things I do, I try to inform myself of what's going on, and started going to banquets and all the publications they put on, the monthly meetings and whatever, and right away got involved in the boards, and within, I don't know, 5 or 6 years I was the president. So it was a good way to introduce the kids and the family into agriculture. We always had stuff to do with uncles and cousins and whatever. So this is where we started, and I think I bought about 6 or 8 deer, females to start with, and then a buck, and
Okay.
slowly grew from there.
Can I just get some clarification? So you started going to banquets and things like that, and then you became the president of what?
The Alberta Whitetail and Mule Deer Association. So, so the Elk Commission, they were a commission, we were an association. They have their own board of directors and zone members and stuff like that. So the Alberta Whitetail Mule Deer Association had the same thing. So got involved and met some really fantastic people. Then lots of people in Saskatchewan also, because it was big in both provinces, and got to know people both sides of the border. And the end market for the deer was the hunting industry for the most part. Like a lot of upstarts, there was a lot of breeding stocks being sold, but we all know that breeding stock isn't an industry. So that was the final goal for it. The meat wasn't a huge thing, does that were too old or to breed anymore. They produce 70 pounds of meat, so and it wouldn't matter what you charge for it. There's not a lot in it. So that was kind of the direction that went. And I was involved with all the negotiations with Ralph Klein when he said that hunt ranches were abhorrent. Never heard that word until Ralph said it. But in the end, I felt Ralph was pretty good premier. So he didn't like what we were doing, but he did pretty good for the province. And I could see both sides of the fence, I guess. So we worked in Saskatchewan. And as my farm grew, it was in probably 2002. Good friend of mine, Dean, we decided to start a hunting business together. And we found some trade shows in the States and got on a plane and went down there and promoted something we'd never really done before. And in a couple of years, our business took right off. We were just kind of straightforward and honest with guys, and it worked out for us. And I would imagine 3 or 4 years into it, we had maybe the 5th year, we had 65 clients and just tearing the industry up, doing real well. And it was just a good thing to do. The family got involved, and as my daughters were being born, they got involved and at a very small age, and it was just a lot of fun. And as we progressed, I was working in an oil patch. That's what funded most of this, and decided that maybe I wanted to get a second species so that we could maybe get out of the oil patch one day. So that's when we got into bison. So, and there was only one of my daughters at the meeting there, but my wife and my 3 daughters are all very, very involved in the farm. And when the oldest daughter, who was at the meeting, Cassidy, got engaged and got married, well, her husband then became quite involved in the farm. So we spent all those years growing the farm, and then we bought land in Saskatchewan, started a hunting business in Saskatchewan in 2002, 2003, and grew that business and just had a lot of success. And lots of people in Saskatchewan and some in Alberta had had the misfortune of probably in the last 8 years or 9 years getting CWD on their farm and the government taking them out. So
So
one elk,
what is CWD?
it's chronic wasting disease, which is mad cow disease, BSE, Charles Jacobson's disease in humans, scrapies in sheep. It's all very, very, very similar. And of course, it's a disease they want to track and follow and make sure it's not getting out of hand. So I believe it was the mid to late 1800s that there was a huge scrapies outbreak in North America. And from what I understand, hundreds of thousands, millions of sheep had it and died. And back then there wasn't a lot of fences and certainly not a lot of biosecurity. And if that's where it came from, that's my belief. But I certainly wasn't around then, and I'm no scientist. But there was a lot of stuff happen. So it's been blamed on the game farmers. It's been blamed on a lot of things. But scrapies was around long before we were, from what I can. Or scrapies was around, BSE was around, and certainly CWD was around. So that's kind of been our nemesis all these years with the biosecurity on the farms and the traceability, the tags. So all our animals were serial numbered. We had to get permits to move them from farm to farm in Alberta. We had permits for everything. And to get an animal to Saskatchewan, you needed a federal permit, CFIA. Then you need an Alberta provincial permit. Then you need a Saskatchewan permit from Ag, and then you need a Saskatchewan permit from CERM or their wildlife officers. So it was a lot of work, and in the end, it put so much control on us that it just wiped the majority of the people out. The lot mom and pop operations like we're talking about here in the cattle industry. And I was one of the bigger deer guys. In the end, was probably one of the biggest left, and then they took us out. So on and on, they tracked all the animals had to be submitted once they were dead. So we'd cut the head off, or take in Saskatchewan, you'd take the brain stem, submit it for testing, and so we had literally thousands of animals off my farm over the years that are all tested negative, and that's just how it was. Back in Alberta, for a happy coincidence, we ended up putting a double fence around our deer farm to keep the cattle away so they weren't rubbing on the page wire because it was so darn expensive to put it up. So then we got into bisons, then it was buffalo. And so we had no nose-to-nose contact from wild deer, wild elk, anything on the outside, or cattle for that matter, with our deer. So that's just kind of a small benefit we had with our farm. And we would haul hundreds of animals to Saskatchewan a year. They were hunted, they were tested, everything was done right. Me and Dean were actually the poster child for the Saskatchewan hunting industry, because most of the guys weren't submitting their heads. And we were submitting the heads because we wanted to do it right. If I got a disease problem, we want to do it right. No different than every cattle guy in Alberta. If something's going on, we're going to our vet. Our vets are obligated to report it. We don't want it. We want to do things as best to our ability. But where it all kind of hit the fan, and the government had, over the years, they put us under quarantine once or twice, saying we couldn't sell animals because some animal had contracted, that one of our animals we had sold to a different hunt ranch, because we sold to multiple ones, had CWD, and we always came through it because we just didn't really have a problem. So they contacted me, it'd be probably 3.5 years ago now, or maybe close to 3 years anyway. I think it was before Christmas, and said that they felt we had CWD. So we got into our initial conversations, and they said, well, one of the animals that, no, actually it was February now I think about it, because it was, I'd hauled animals in the fall, and so it had been late August, early September, and sold to another hunt ranch. They didn't shoot the animals until February. So then they took the animals in and had them tested. Two of them had tested positive. So the CFIA inspector from Red Deer, we'll call him Mr. D, decided that they needed to have a chat with us, and they put my farm on quarantine. And he said under no chance that those animals could have contracted CWD in Saskatchewan and been that far along with their CWD when they tested them. And I said, well, I'm double fenced here at home. And I said, we just don't have skinny, distressed animals. Because when a deer gets CWD, they stick by the water bowls, they get skinny, they get distressed. It's just the way it is. So, and when we had sick animals on the farm, and it's kind of cruel to say, but the best way to treat them was with a .22 rifle and send the head in and get it tested. A deer seemed like once you noticed it was sick, it was quite sick, and it just wasn't worth taking a chance. So we made sure we were on top. We made sure that we didn't fool around, and we followed, what we felt were the things to do. So they guaranteed me that if it come out to my farm, they would point out 3, 6, 7, 8 animals that had CWD. So this Mr. D came out, and there was someone else with him, and I just can't remember who that person was at this point. And they inspected every animal on my farm. We looked at every tag, accounted for every animal. I had to have lists of what pens they were in, what pens they had been in, just the whole 9 yards. And we went through, and then they decided to have a little discussion 15 feet away from me. And when I was come back, I said, so which ones have CWD? And they said, well, we're not certain we know, but we know you have it, but we haven't been able to identify anybody looking at them. So those must have been the only 2 animals on your farm that had it, just miraculously went to the same place at the same time, and both contracted it. So anyway, coincidence, I guess, my unluck, whatever. So they told me that they're quarantining my farm, and I would never be allowed to ship an animal off my farm or bring one onto my farm. And so that's, I guess, the difference with, I don't know a lot about what happened with the ostriches in BC, but my deer were expensive to feed. They were highly profitable, like lots of deer we sold for 20, 25 grand. But they were expensive to feed. My feed bill a year was $200,000. So that was, it was a lot of money. So if I was never going to be allowed to sell them and I could never move them off, I just couldn't justify that expense. So we agreed to let them put them down, and my farm followed all the rules, so I qualified for compensation. So once we started on this compensation thing, they had to inspect the farm. They had to, like, a really in-depth inspection. They inspected my shops, my trailers, everything. Like, it was an anal probe like no other. It was one of the worst things that I've had to go through. The paperwork that my wife had to produce, the documents that we kept track of. We had to step into a bleach boot bath every day. If we went onto the farm 10 times a day, we had to get into that boots bath 10 times a day. When a tractor had a load of feed on to take into the animals, we had to use a quad sprayer, because they said use a hand sprayer, but tires are big, and we had to have them soaked in this bleach solution for 30 minutes before you could bring them onto the farm. Like, the work was horrendous, the work that they did or that they insisted that we did to get onto the farm. So anyway, so we agreed to put the animals down, because with all the work it was to go on the farm, to keep our status, to move animals off and stuff, was just, it wasn't doable. And there was the government, they told us there's no way that you're ever going to get your ability to ship these animals again. So, I said, well, what about suing? What about, challenging in court? What about feeding them for a year? And if nothing else dies or nothing else gets sick, well, then we've proven that they don't have CWD. He said, no, that's not good enough. I said, there's a live test in the United States. I said, what if I pay for the test? What if I pay to bring American veterinarians up, do the testing, ship the samples down, test them all? No, it's not good enough. And so from what I understand, I think, like, the live test was 99% or 98.8% effective, and the dead test is 99.9. Like, it's like a percent or half a percent different. Like, it's minuscule. So like I said, well, if we come up and we test them and nothing tests positive, then let's wait 6 months, retest the whole herd, and if nothing tests positive again, then I will exempt myself from selling breeding stock, which was a pretty big deal for us. We sold, 150, 200 grand worth of breeding stock a year. So we'll exempt ourselves from that, and we'll just take animals to our hunt ranch. And we guarantee that we'll kill them all within 4 months. If the hunters don't get them, we'll bring in a group of, whether it's fish and wildlife guys, a group of buddies, whatever, and every animal that goes on will come off. They'll be tested, whether we get paid for them or not, and we'll do that for the first couple of years. And if nothing tests positive, then we can go back to, life as usual. And no, that's not good enough. We know you have it. We're killing them all, or you're stuck with feeding them forever. So my hands were tied. I had nothing to do. So then it comes down is they don't want to kill them. They want you to kill them. So they forced me to come up with ways to do it. And of course, shooting was the only way. And do you bring neighbors on? Do you do this? Do you do that? Do you, hire, like, nobody cares for our animals like we care for them ourselves. And you go into it and say, well, I don't trust anybody to have the sympathy for those animals like I do. So we did the best job we could, and we did a very good job. So the people that had done it, because I know many other friends, people that are almost family, that have had to put their herds down, and I didn't necessarily think that how they did it was the best way. And we came up and we did it really well. And we actually videotaped it all. And there's times that we had just me and my son-in-law, we could have 25 deer in about 45, 50 seconds completely dealt with. And that was as efficient as we felt we could be. And anyway, so it was heartbreaking. My oldest daughter, being the oldest one, she had spent the most time on the farm, because hence she's the oldest daughter. So she couldn't be around when we did that. And um, the youngest one, I guess, was the one that probably spent the most time helping with in the shooting. And that little fart at 13 years old would hook a chain around deer and drag them out into the rows and rows and rows of deer, dead deer. And it took 3 days to kill the 550 deer. It would come in the morning. We'd shoot at night, and then it'd come in the morning. But you know, 13-year-old kid helping load clips for guns, and wife helping load clips for guns, and dealing with the pools of blood and the just whatever. It's horrifying. Go watch a couple horror movies. We'll fit right in. So 3 days of doing this and getting all the animals out. CFIA taking over my farm, probably not anywhere to the situation that they did at the ostrich farm. The TV videos and the internet videos I've seen is just horrendous what those guys did to those people. But they took over my, $400,000 shop and use my wash bay and use this and use that, and it stunk of bleach and all the other crap they had in there for weeks after. It the blood on the gravel, the just the I said, well, you guys should clean up my gravel and haul it away and haul fresh. Oh, we can't do that. They wanted to bury the animals on my property, and I told them under no circumstances were they put in this. If you feel that they're that much of a threat, why would I dispose of your threat? Because the animals, I had them for years and years and years. They did not have CWD. I had a closed herd. I did not bring animals onto my farm to get CWD. So if they had it, they got it from the wild, which in turn, after they tested to 550 deer, not one animal tested positive. So through all this bullshit that we dealt with, all this horrendous stuff, the crying children, the crying wives, the crying father, I went in an industry that was nowhere near as big as the cattle industry. We weren't even in the same realm, but I started off with 8 or 10 deer, and I had my farm, and my ex-business partner Dean, he had his farm, and he was taken out a couple years before me, and we did something that very few farm boys from Central Alberta could do. Is when we kind of quit the hunting and stuff like that, we had half of the entries into the SCI record book, which is Safari Club International, from our little ranch, which was the biggest whitetail hunting preserve in Saskatchewan at the time. We did some fantastic things. We followed the rules. We did everything the government did. And we would sit at these meetings and we would negotiate that, no, this is too strict. This is too this is too that. And we'd agree to 8 or 10 rules. And the damn paperwork would come out 6 months later and there was 15 rules in there. Like I've had a few beef guys argue with me, well, these rules that you're spouting off about are not what we agreed to. And I go, that's just normal. That's what the CFIA does. Like, I'm talking to cattle producers at some of these meetings that have been doing it 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And, I feel like a child amongst all these very educated and, from hard work and experience. But one thing I have as much experience on as probably most people in Central Alberta or whatever, and maybe in this country, is dealing with CFIA. And they're not good people. Like, one, I hate to talk pretty like this, but they're not that educated in a lot of respects. Like, they don't sit and have animal husbandry and raise these animals and work in their communities and do this and do that. Like, these farmers that are walking out by that fence post that's wore in an inch and a half or 2 inches because he's opened it thousands, hundreds of thousands of times, and he looked at the back end of a cow or the back end of a deer or did this or do that, and generations of this. And then some jackass from Ottawa comes in, or hired by Ottawa, and now mostly they're not even hiring people that have lived in this country for very long. They don't understand what we do in Canada. They don't understand what it's like to raise an animal minus 40. They don't understand what it's like to get feed off in between rainstorms in the summer just so your animals can do this and survive, and the infrastructure that we build and the families that do it with us. Like, my kids were knee high when we were doing this, and my youngest daughter at 12 years old was checking my herd, which the oldest two did the same thing at the same age, but they go out and they check the herd. And if we had an animal that dies on our farm and it falls in the tall grass and rots and the head isn't testable, we would lose our status to sell to Saskatchewan. And that's the kind of stuff that's going to happen with the cattle industry. It might be a few decades away. It might be 5 years away. I don't know. But that the rules were so strict. So that little girl drove out on a quad every day with a pair of binoculars and a little notepad, and she counted every deer on my farm every day. That's what we did.
Hey, friend. friends on Don's Dirt. We get real about growing food, farming, homesteading, living free, and digging into the stuff that actually matters. If you're loving the dirt we're dishing out, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow on your favorite social media platforms. That's how we keep growing this community of badass, soil-covered, chicken-loving, freedom-chasing humans. Like and subscribe to me on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it. Come be part of the movement. Yeah, when you were talking at the meeting, you were talking about your daughter and you were talking how she fed her bottle baby deers and how,
Yeah.
like it's really a connection. Like your family was really connected to this herd and your animal husbandry was up to par, even the double fence and things like that. Some of the things that stood out to me when you spoke and shared your story at the meeting is just how good of a farmer you were and are, still are. Anyways, and then it also stood out that you have dealt with CFIA, not just on this level with your deer, but in the rules and regulations. And you were you said you were the president of a board. And so you would go back and forth with CFIA, writing rules, coming up with policies and things like that. And so can you tell me about how that process was? And, you were saying something about a binder that was like 14 inches thick and they would come out with a couple of things. Can you just expand on that? What it's actually like to deal with CFIA and these rules and regulations?
So they would, and on top of CFIA, it was Alberta, also the Alberta and Saskatchewan governments too. So we actually had 3 sets of rules to follow, but they would come up with new rules all the time. And we would agree to one thing, and then, the rules would come out and there'd be 2 or 3 more things involved. And I'll be honest, the Alberta government did it, and mainly the Saskatchewan government did it, and CFIA. So they all did it. And that's just government overreach to start with. And that's why I proposed that we had a producer-driven program to track traceability. Because in all this stuff, and maybe I failed to say this at these meetings, is I'm not against traceability. Nobody's against traceability. We're against the government overreach. And what's the next step? Because I lived it. Like, the manuals and the work that we had to do to make all this work just got thicker every year. Whether it was the LIDA Act, was the Livestock Diversification Act, and I believe that was the Alberta government, or CERM in Saskatchewan, because on top of appeasing ag, then we had to appease the wild guys. Like it was just one step after another. And maybe back in the early 90s, late 80s, when kind of game farming got started, maybe there were some cowboys out there that didn't have good fences or stole the odd wild deer or whatever. But in the end, when I was in it, like the wild genetics were 10% of what our farm raised ones, just like some of these cattle guys, they're weaning calves that are just incredible. They got bulls that are amazing. You can tell that they've got 30 years of, cattle experience behind them and what they're doing, or whether it's a pig producer or a poultry guy that's just raises bigger chickens or does whatever. It's just the whole thing was all this experience and all these people. And then we have, whether it's CFIA coming in and adding another 3 pages to the documents, or the Alberta government doing the same thing. But producers were just always a half a step behind, and they talk about, this is something I've seen a lot, and I think you've taken a little grief over this too, is anything that I've spoke about, I've just read off the CFIA website. Just plain simple. It's sometimes not always easy to find because they're really good at making it a little obscure. So we're reading off the websites, and we're reading the rules that are there, the things we have to follow. But what these groups agreed to, 6 months ago or 2 years ago or whatever, aren't necessarily the rules that are in there. And these producers are always playing catch up. It's just one big thing of catch up, and that's all it's ever going to be. And as soon as you just figure out how to implement the rules that they just put in, your binder gets another 4 pages, 3 pages, 10 pages, whatever. And we're modeling ourselves after the European Union. And I said this a few times, like, oh my God, that's, and I guess I'm just going to say it, like, it's asking the retarded kid down the street to freaking do your taxes. Like, I'm sorry, that's not who we ask. You ask the smartest kid in the class, like you ask the people that excel at this, and people are getting mad. They're threatening people. And like some of these people on these boards, like they're pushing their agenda, like who they said they consulted. Because I've got some cousins that are be fourth generation now farming, and 3 generations are still alive on the farm, and none of them knew anything about it. I've got neighbors that are the same thing. One neighbor across the street's 100-year farm. They were not consulted. They were not told. So maybe we don't read the publications. Maybe we're so wrapped up in feeding Betsy in the backyard that we don't know. But you would have thought somebody that I know a lot of farmers. You would have thought somebody would have heard something. And the only people that I've ever found to know anything about it are sitting on a board. So how is that consultation?
For sure. And so for the listeners that are maybe just don't know about this yet, but the CFIA has now changed the rules around beef traceability. So beef actually has a really good traceability program, a current one, but they're wanting to change all the rules and regulations. And so what they're wanting to do is they're wanting to put everything into a government database so that every time you move a beef on or off your farm, not within your farm, but on or off your farm, it has to be put into a government database so the government knows where every animal is at all times so they can be tracked and traced. And so if you think about especially like the rodeo situation or like rodeos or cattle shows or our small auction markets, they want to know where all these animals came into contact with one another and left. And they just want to know exactly where every animal is at all times. And it's government overreach. There is a current system that works, that is in place, but you're right. No one knew about this. And so when I got the call to say, hey, Dawn, like these new rules and regulations are coming into place, they're pretty invasive and pretty, like not what the farmers want, and it's going to hurt the small farmers. That's the part of the issue as well, is that these new rules and regulations, yeah, maybe the big guys can absorb it, but the small mom and pop farms cannot handle it. I was talking to an older farmer, and he said, I barely know how to run a computer, let alone track and trace every animal into the computer on my 40 head of beef. He just doesn't want to do it. He can't do it. It's just not within the realm of possibility. And so what do you think that these new rules and regulations will do to the smaller producer?
Well, I think it's going to push a lot of them out because I'm 51 and I'm a young farmer. I am a young rancher. And, I had to have my wife figure the computer out for me to come on your podcast tonight. Like, this is not something that's my wheelhouse, but my wife's pretty good at this stuff. Could we manage what's there? Probably. But my daughter was chatting with a couple people the other day, and the one guy's in his 60s and said the same thing you just did. Doesn't know how to do it. Doesn't, and you mess up on one number or whatever, and you're sending stuff in, and it has to be submitted by a computer, from what I understand. So he just said, "I'll just sell my cows." So there we are, somebody that's in his mid 60s. So he doesn't have a kid that wants to farm, but he's got grandkids coming up. And you know what? Maybe one of them wants to grab the horns, but he needs 5 or 8 more years, and like that's what's going to happen. And then with the big corporations, whether it's the Hutterite colonies or some of these 20,000 acre farms, and there's 2 or 3 big private farms too, they just eat up all this land and then it's gone. And instead of one family every 2 miles raising children on the farm and doing this and doing that, there's a family every 10 miles that's actually raising it on a farm, or every 15 miles or whatever. The number of farm families in town is just less and less and less. Like, I don't know how many times that here are kids that come home with one of my kids. Oh my God, can I come handle cattle or help handle the bison? They just want to help because they don't have any of these experience. They just come out and think, oh, this is so great, this is so wonderful. And I encourage my kids to bring friends home. One, it's free help, and it's great. And these kids love it. They just love coming to help, and because they just don't experience it. And when I grew up, most farmers had 2 or 3 or 4 quarters, and they did just fine. They had nice houses. They got to play hockey and went on a holiday once in a while, and life was good. And it's just not there anymore. Like, it's just not there. And the competitiveness in the markets, and somebody like me, like, we've got just over 300 cows. We're still, even though we're above the average, we're still a pretty small farmer. And it seems to be the people that are yelling the most and balking the most at this are the feedlots and the big guys, and they're the ones pushing it. So what do they know that we don't, or why are they pushing it? Maybe it's just to force a few more guys out so they can get a few more head or a few more quarters. I don't know. I don't know. I would like to see all my children grow up in the country, which we have that plan. They're all going to have houses in the country. Looks like only one's going to be a farmer, but they're all going to help each other. And like, what could be a better thing? And who knows? maybe my oldest daughter who wants to take over the farm with her husband. Maybe it won't even be her kids that want to farm. Might be the youngest one's kids that want to farm, and they're going to take it from uncle and auntie. Like, who knows? But that's the whole idea of trying to give everyone the opportunity. And even if they all grow up to be doctors and lawyers and school teachers and don't want to do anything, they're going to damn well come over and help, and they're going to see, you know, from the ground to their plate, you know, from the beginning to the end, and that's stuff that's important for everyone. I remember when I was in grade 6, and I don't remember what class it was, but they had different groups, and it was different people. If the tire shop would have 4 or 5 kids, and they would kind of teach the kids what was going on in the tire shop, and then maybe it was the lawyer in town or whatever. And my group was a farm group, and my 2 uncles farmed together, so there was 4 or 5 or 6 of us, and one of the teachers took us out there. Maybe it was a parent, I don't remember, and we got to spend a day on the farm, and we had to write little reports on what happened and stuff, and like it was just good. Well, my kids sure haven't talked about anything like that. It's just we are losing our sense. And all these little guys, it's just one more expense, one more expense. The tractors, like tractors I bought 5 years ago, are almost double again. You know, like we bought 305 grand for one tractor here, well, 6 years ago now. That same tractor's 550,000. Like you can't keep going in that direction. So it's pushing us out, and it's more regulations here. So that guy that's in his 60s or 70s, or even someone like me, doesn't know how to run a computer, and you want me to go into the office and wasn't fortunate enough to have a wife that knows what's going on. Like there I am for a whole damn day to put the numbers into the computer that I spent 3 hours or 2 hours getting off 180 or 200 cows. Like it's just, and it's unnecessary. It was said at those meetings, we have a system and it's not broke. So if I trusted CFIA, okay, if there's something that you can come out with that streamlines this, but there's got to be 2 options. There's got to be 2 ways to do it. And you know what? If it's so damn important, instead of I can see billions of dollars of waste in this country, have someone come help us. You want the numbers so damn bad? Get one of your little goons and put his white little uniform on, and you can come scan my cows for me. I know if Albertans get together and make an Alberta solution to an Alberta problem, because we don't have a problem in Alberta. We got brands, we got tags, and we got manifests. Life's good. So we will clean up the system if it needs to be cleaned up, but there's brand inspectors, and I've screwed up and wrote on my manifest and didn't put my wife's name on. I just put my name on because we're in a hurry to go there. I get a call from the brand inspector every time. Excuse me, this brand is registered to you and your wife. I'm like, oh crap. And I said this last time. I said, well, why don't you just send her the check and then we know it's good? And he laughed. Because there's checks and balances on all this. We're fine. Like they know what's going on. The system right now, it works, and it works well. So if I sell an animal, and if they can find out that the check shouldn't go to just me, it's got to go to me and my wife, they sure should be able to figure out if something's got BSE and figure out how to get it back to me and find out where they came from.
Are you sitting on a farm or homestead that could be making you real money? Tired of guessing on how to market your products? I owned a 36,000 square foot greenhouse. I ran 2 farm to table stores. I had 30 people on payroll. I brought in $2.5 million in gross revenue in 2020, selling farm goods directly to customers. Now I teach farmers and homesteaders how to make money and save money off the land they already have. Whether you're selling eggs, beef, produce, baked goods, or anything in between, if you want to get into direct marketing and grow your sales, I'm the girl for you. Stop leaving money on the table and start putting it into your bank account. Join me at Dawn's Dirt Business Coaching, and let's make your farm pay you back. Right? And that's the point, is we've already got checks and balances. So why do we need this all into a government database where the government knows exactly where every animal is at all times, at all moments? And I don't know, to me, it's just a little bit of overreach. And if I got a text when we were in the middle of that meeting, I actually got a text from someone, and they said, in Finland right now, every dog and every cat and every gerbil and every animal needs to be registered on the database. And so that's where this is headed. It's not, maybe you can do this now with beef, but where does it stop? And that's the point. And that's what I really wanted to hear in this podcast episode is you've dealt with CFIA. You know how they operate. You know that they'll say this and make it sound good. And next thing you know, the bureaucracy is just layered and layered and layered on, and you're having to do 10 more things than you even agreed to. And then they still came in and they still decided that your farm was basically done and every animal had to be killed. Like, that's the point, is they just come in and they don't look at it as a farm and an animal and food and things like that. They look at it as like numbers on a page. And one thing that I was going to ask you, you said it in the when you shared at the meeting there, they came on to your farm and at the end of the day, all of your animals tested negative. And so what did that Mr. D, what did he say to you at the end?
So it was a few weeks after, because it takes them a while to get them all tested, and they came back and they had some paperwork we had to sign and whatever, and he said to me, "Well, at least we know." And I did promise my wife that I wouldn't go to jail over this whole situation because there was a lot of, I guess, typical husband and wife pillow talk that was pretty aggressive, and and that broke me. You spend your life being a good person, and you have a slimy little SOB, you know, run by a pile of other slimy little SOBs, and they know damn well what they're being asked isn't right. When he looked at my farm and he couldn't see any skinny, dying, diseased animals, he had doubt. I know he did. And up the line and up the line, there's always doubt. They think they know, but they don't. And I can guarantee you too now that my farm was proof that those animals can contract it sooner and be at a later stage than anything that they ever known before. And I could guarantee you, if I had the knowledge and the ability to go into their database and find out if their policies have changed, I can guarantee you they haven't. They don't care. And I've said this before, CFIA is killers. They're absolute killers. That's all they do. They want to talk about what's better for the farmers, what's better for the consumers. They're touting this off as this is going to be better for us to have more market access and all this kind of stuff. We all know that big business runs government, whether it's on this side of the border, south of the border, across the pond. Big business runs government. This is my opinion. Call me a conspiracy theorist. But if there's a cow comes up with BSE in Alberta again, and they shut that border down, do you honestly think if we can pinpoint what acre of land that cow grew up on and where his last fart and his last shit was, that they're going to open that border quicker? Because big business runs government. So all those wealthy stockyard owners and slaughter plant owners and feedlot owners, they're going to want that border closed for a year, maybe a year and a half, and they're going to buy all this cheap Canadian cattle, and they're going to put them on these feedlots that they already own in Alberta, because most of them are owned by people in the States. And once they're full of fat cattle, they're going to open that damn border, 50 cents on the dollar to us if we're lucky, and they're going to run them across the border, and they're going to get paid their margins, which they always do, and they're going to have an extra whatever, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 an animal. I ain't going to get paid anymore. My neighbor ain't going to get paid anymore. And the guy out east in Quebec that has cattle out there and the guy in Ontario, they're not going to get paid anymore. So why are we doing this? So if Alberta has a made in Alberta solution, we make ourselves a jurisdiction. Let's have a made in Alberta. Let's do it. And, let's talk to our trading partners. And if there is somebody in the USDA that says this is going to make it better, but who in the USDA, what person came or what memo was sent that says, if you do this, we're going to give you better market access? I don't believe it. This is all about money. It's control for the government, and the borders are dictated on money. It is money, money, money. And that's, if everything was because of right and wrong and what made sense, you would still have your greenhouse. I'd still have my deer. It's just how it is. So it's money.
You're right. And that's the thing. And I've been calling it out for 10 years now. He who controls the food controls the people. And it's about power and control at the top. And I think that's what we're seeing within this whole beef thing is you've got the big ones at the top and money, 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 power and control. And it's just going to put more and more and more out of business. And that's sad. We talked about it earlier. I think more kids need to know that their food doesn't come from a grocery store, that their food comes from a farm. People need to know that you plant a carrot seed and you pull it out of the ground and you eat it just like that. They need to know that their beef was raised, down the road. They need to be able to see and connect the dots between, where their food comes from. And we've got more and more disconnect between the farms and the people who are eating. And then, yeah, follow the dollars, follow the big business, and follow the bureaucracy, and that's where it's landing. And that's why I spoke up, is because there was a young mom, and she's just got 25 head of cattle, and she's like, I want to have a farm for my kids. I'm afraid I'm not going to have a farm for my kids, and that is why I opened my mouth. And that's where we're at.
It
Yeah.
sure is. And I think if we do a made in Alberta solution, I've traveled the world hunting. I've seen many people all over, some incredibly intelligent people. I've seen some industries in other countries that have succeeded and failed, and seen what they're doing and applied it back to what we do here. And I can say without a doubt, Albertans are as intelligent as any group of people across this world. So if there is a way that the US government would accept our beef on a quicker, after some disease outbreak or some problem, I think the best solution is to have these intelligent people in this province who we've proven we're the breadbasket of Canada. Maybe the province to the east of us is very similar. So we raise all this oil and gas, or raise all the cattle, all the grain, all this oil and gas, which Saskatchewan's got a pile of that too. We're doing the fabulous, wonderful things. So let's take good producers out of Alberta and go to the States and have chats with USDA. Is there something that would make it better for us if something happened to get our animals down south? That's a question that I'd love the answer to. But why are we doing a made in Ottawa scenario? Because anything that's come out of Ottawa since I've been old enough to remember hasn't really significantly improved the life of people in Alberta. I listened to my grandpa when I was 8, 10 years old and can remember. He talked politics more than anything. And I've never heard them say, you know what, Chrétien did this or this did that or somebody did something positive for the West. It's just, we've seen the cartoons, the same cartoons been in the papers back and forth and now on the internet with the cow and eaten in the West and being milked in the East. Like it's the way it is. So somebody show me something tangible that says that I need to do this to help myself out, or maybe we should maybe take a little page out of Ralph Klein's book and tell him to piss off.
Yeah. Yeah, that Ralph Klein, he good and bad. There was good and bad with him. I remember when this is off topic now. I'm going on a little rabbit hole here, but there was something to do with the natural gas prices, and my dad, he ended up, this is where I got my page from. My dad phoned Ralph Klein's office every day and left a message and was talking to them about the natural gas prices, and there was something with natural gas, and his office said, "Well, put a sweater on." And my dad said, "How do I put sweaters on cucumber plants? You can't really do that." And so I don't remember all. I was young then. I don't remember what all went down. And so when we had the carbon tax in Alberta here, I phoned Notley's office every day for 6 weeks. "Hi, I'm talking to you about the carbon tax and what it's going to do to food prices." And so, yeah, it's crazy. We need more. We need more. I don't know. What's your thought on this? I like the idea of small farms, and so more farm to table. What's your thought on farm to table? I'm going to ask you that question.
I think it's excellent. And I'll be honest, I have people ask me all the time, do you have a half a beef to sell? Do you have a box of steaks to sell? And I'm like, well, I haven't followed the rules, but I know I can't just sell a box of steaks. I know I can't do that. I know you have to sell the whole animal. I think you can sell it to 2 people. I'm not sure. And there's a limit to 4, 5, 6. I forget. I just don't want the stress, because there's so many rules. Now, if they would make it to where we could function a little better, I think it's the most wonderful thing in the world. And you know what? You got Bob the carpenter and Frank the lawyer in town, and they want to do it. So, sell them a calf or whatever, and maybe their kids can spend a little time out in the farm and kind of see how it goes. There's so many wonderful things that we could do. And if they just want to show up and have somebody butcher and slaughter it and send it to the the butcher shop to have it packaged so they can put it on, and they know that what this animal's had. They can come out when we're handling animals. What's this animal had? Well, we keep good track of that. I'd like to buy a steer calf that's never had a needle that's for antibiotics, or no problem. If that's a thing, I'm not too worried about it. But if that's a thing, as long as I wait my 60 days, I'm happy. So there's so many things that we could promote this, and then they're not filling the Walmarts and the Costcos of the world that it's just another billionaire making a little more money. And maybe I get to make two or three or $400 more an animal, and they get a little better meat and it's cheaper. They buy more at once, but they get the meat a little bit cheaper and certainly a lot better. And life is good. Like I want simple in my life, and that's why I got into cattle. And here we are back at 1990s again, like, in the deer industry. And I do not believe that they're not taking this farther. If I thought this was the end of it, I wouldn't be on your podcast today. I wouldn't be standing on my soapbox and telling people, hey, I've walked down this road and I'm suspicious. Once bitten, twice shy. I see the writing on the wall and it ain't going away.
No, and that's the thing. And with every industry as well, I think that's you when you talked about our grocery stores, I think it's the middlemen. It's the middlemen that make the money. It's the middlemen. That's where some of the money is to be made. The farmers get dictated their input costs and they get dictated pricing. And so that's why we've seen big farms get bigger. And I don't fault them for getting bigger. Because your margins are really thin in farming, but it's every step in between that. It's the packing plants, it's the warehouses, it's the grocery stores, and everyone takes their little piece of the pie, but the farmer gets, they get their price dictated to them in the first end, and then the consumer, they're paying high prices for stuff that, yeah, if we could somehow figure out how a better system or a different system of farm to table with the connection and I think that's where we need to go back to. We need to go back. I feel like we need to go back like 50 years to where the way farming was back then, when every farm had some dairy cows and some pigs and some chickens and some, a few of this and a few of that. Cause I don't know. That's just my thought.
Well, that's how I grew up with my father was in the oil industry. So we didn't have a pile of farm animals around home, but 3 miles away it was my uncle's place, and me and my little brother spent a lot of hours there, lots of summers there doing stuff, and it's everyone did it. I don't know how many people sold eggs and how many, sold pork and how many, just whatever. Like, it was just how it was, and it was good for everybody. Nobody died because they bought a pig off of Farmer Brown. It just, like, it just wasn't an issue. And we need
Yeah.
to get back to our roots. You know, these phones and this technology and all this shit, it's not better. Like, it might be more convenient for some things, but we don't have a better life. In my family, and this is my wife's rule, and it's probably the number one thing that's brought my family closer together, is no cell phones. If you open your cell phone at supper time, God help you. When we're playing card night and game night with the kids, like, do not sit on that. We limit. Two of my girls are out of the house now, but we limit time on internet. We do all that. We limit time for ourselves. Like, what's wrong with talking to your neighbor, going for a visit, or playing a card game? Like, we were just in Canmore for the weekend, and that was one of the big things, is find a new board game for the family. Like, we don't do enough of that. And it comes from whether it's feeding ourselves, whether it's spending time with our family, or anything we do. We need to spend more time going back to our roots, because the direction we're going isn't better. Everything. It's just always going the wrong way. I don't need my truck to massage me. Do I like it? Yes. But is it enhancing my life? No. Sitting at the table with my family, eating food that came out of my garden and out of my pasture, and without a cell phone interruption, that enhances my life every night.
I agree. And you know what? Back to this whole beef traceability thing. I think that's half the problem. Is we've been sending out emails and we've been sending out messages and we've been, did you read the magazine? No, people are busy farming. They're busy doing the work on their farm. They're working the land. And we've lost the art of just going to the neighbor's house, having a cup of coffee. And like you said at the beginning of the podcast here, no one knew anything about this. And it's because we're not connected anymore. We're not going down to the neighbor's house and having that cup of coffee. We're not, going down to the local coffee shop and talking to all the farmers, or doing the community. I grew up have it with the community dance at the local, community hall, and where you connected with everybody. We've just lost some of those things in life. We've lost the small farms. We've lost the farm to table. We think everything comes from a grocery store, and you're right. We just need to go backwards that little bit more and start connecting to people more. And it was the miscommunication. That's what it came down to, is a miscommunication between, the people making the rules and the people who now have to follow them, because it was a lack of communication.
And that's a big word, communication. I think we could take a couple of subjects out of school and insert a communication course, which would really help out. And why aren't they teaching kids how to do some of this stuff? And all these kids are doing work experience and they're doing all these great, wonderful things, but most of them have no clue, that a chicken has one egg a day, that you don't eat a laying chicken, you eat a, it's just, there's so much. Brown milk doesn't come from a brown cow. Like, there's so many things that we could teach these kids, and it's not all, going to be their cup of tea, but it sure doesn't hurt that they know it. And the people that want to know, they should have the ability to have fresh meat, fresh produce, and fresh whatever. There is some of these community gardens and stuff in town and stuff, and that is a good idea, but it's such a small amount. Like, we'll be probably May before we're not eating produce out of last year's garden. Obviously we don't have lettuce left, but that's what my wife canning and freezing and blanching, and like, that's what we do. And if there's a piece of red meat on my table, it came out of the pasture.
That's amazing. And that's actually what I'm doing now. So I went from having my greenhouse and my farm to I now teach people how to grow gardens. And even if you live in town, you can grow a garden, grow a big garden and have a few chickens. I think if everyone grew a garden and had a few chickens and then bought their beef, from the farmer down the road, I think that's where our food system needs to go back to. And that's what I'm doing, is I'm teaching people how to do that now. So thanks so much for
Uh,
being on the show today. Do you have any final words of wisdom or final thoughts about CFIA or the traceability rules, or what give us your final thoughts?
Most of your neighbors you can trust because they'll shake your hand. And if a man comes onto your property and the first thing he does is not shake your hand and tells you he's from the CFIA and has a card and sticks it in your face or tells you what you can and can't do, don't trust him. I trust the people that the first thing they do is come and stick their hand out and say, "My name is Jason. I'm your neighbor. I'm your friend. Can I help you?" And even if you have something bad to tell them with straight shoulders and a handshake, and it'll be all right. CFIA does not do that. That's what I can tell people, is this is more to come.
Yeah. It's so sad. Your story is awful. Yeah, it's awful to hear that you had a whole herd of deer wiped out because they thought they might have a disease and it turns out they didn't. That's disgusting. It's disgusting. So,
Well, we're a country, we're farm, we're friends, we're family, and we now have another direction, and we're all happy. And tragedy sometimes leads you down another path that's pretty good, and we're on a good path now. So I'm going to stand up, and hopefully we don't have to do that path again.
I love it. Love it. Thanks so much for being on the show.